I'm continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a little bit as I move along. Now, I am reading in the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 10 for this video, and there is a Joseph Smith translation in this chapter. What the Joseph Smith translation is this is an inspired translation or correction of the Bible done by Joseph Smith to restore portions of the Bible that had been lost or over the years. Now, there is only one Joseph Smith translation in this chapter, and we will look at it when we get to it. So let us pick this up. 1 Chronicles chapter 10. Philistines defeat Israel. Saul dies for his transgressions. Okay. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard after Saul and after his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was wounded of the archers. Then said Saul to his armor-bearer, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise on the sword and died. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and all his house together. And when all the men of Israel that were in the valley saw that they fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, then they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So far, it's almost word for word the same as Samuel chapter 31, which kind of gives me the impression that either both of these are taken from the same account, which is most likely. There was a chronicle being kept by historians at the time, and the author of what we have as 1 Chronicles and the first book of Samuel used the same source material to write these chapters. So let us just continue. You can get my full analysis of these verses in that video, Samuel chapter 31. And it came to verse 8. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. And when they had stripped him, they took his head and his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to carry tidings unto their idols and to their people. And they put his armor in the house of their gods, and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. Now there's a little extra information there. In 1 Samuel, we are told that they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, the head female deity. This just says in the house of their gods, but then it says fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. And I don't think that it specifies where they put his head in 1 Samuel. I don't remember it specifying that. Yeah. So there's a little, it does say they cut off his head, but now they're saying they put him in the temple of Dagon. Now you'll also recall that in 1 Samuel it does say that they hung his body on the wall of Bethshan. So now we continue, verse 11. And when all Jabesh Gilead heard all that the Philistines had done to Saul, they arose, all the valiant men, and took away the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons, and brought them to Jabesh, and buried their bones under the oak in Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. Now, we read about that also in Samuel, but in Samuel it tells us that they also burnt their bodies to prevent the Philistines from digging them up and redesecrating them. Now, that is basically what we have in 1 Samuel. But now we get just a little bit extra here that the chronicler wants us to know. So we got verse 13. So Saul died for his transgression which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it, and inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him, and turned the kingdom unto David the son of Jesse. Now, this gives us the reason why, but we understand, in Samuel we're given the reason why too. But in Chronicles, remember, the first 9 chapters of Chronicles is just a list of names, naming people or ancestors, naming either the people currently living in Jerusalem or their ancestors. And when I say currently, this is at the time of the Babylonian captivity. The first book of Chronicles was written sometime after the Babylonian captivity, probably during the captivity. And up to this point, we haven't been given any real history, only genealogies. So this is the first kind of historical narrative that the first book of Chronicles has. And so it ends with this last note explaining why Saul was killed, why God let him die. All that explanation was already made earlier on in 1 Samuel, so it didn't need to be added on at the end of 1 Samuel. But anyways, there is this one Joseph Smith translation. This is verse 13. The King James says, "So Saul died for his transgression, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it." Joseph Smith changes this, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking for a familiar spirit. So, it's not a real big change, but it does clarify. See, you can ask counsel of somebody with a familiar spirit without asking them to conjure up their familiar spirit. You can just talk to them and get some advice. But by stating that he wasn't just asking advice of the witch of Endor. That's what he's talking about, the story of the witch of Endor. He wasn't just asking for advice from the witch. He asked for a familiar spirit to be conjured. That's what was wrong. Talking to the witch isn't what the problem was. The problem was he asked for the familiar spirit to be conjured up. Anyways, nice, short, sweet chapter. We will leave it there and pick it up in 2 Samuel in our next reading. See you then.